Sign it, Mom or die in this house alone. That was the first thing my son said to me that morning. No good morning, no. How are you? Just that cold, sharp, and final. I froze my hand, hovering over the table where a thick stack of papers sat between us. The old oak table had seen birthdays, Sunday dinners, and tears. But never this. Never betrayal written in legal ink. Daniel leaned forward, his jaw tight. You're 72, Mom. You can't keep up with this place. It's time. Time for what I whispered. For you to stop pretending you can handle things. His wife, Lauren, answered, her voice slick and sweet like honey over a blade. She stood near the window, arms crossed, sunlight glinting off her diamond bracelet. You'll still live here, of course. It's just a transfer, nothing more. I looked down at the first page. Property transfer agreement. My name right beside Daniel's. The room smelled of lemon polish and burnt toast. The clock above the stove ticked too loud. My throat felt like sandpaper. This is my home, I said quietly. Daniel sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Mom, don't make this harder than it needs to be. We're doing this for you. For me, I repeated, staring at the faded photos on the wall, him in his graduation gown, me holding him at his wedding. You're taking the house your father built, Daniel. He slammed his palm on the table. Dad's gone. Let it go. We can sell this place, buy you something smaller, simpler. Lauren stepped closer. A condo near us. Safer, cleaner. You'll love it. Love it. The words made my stomach twist. I looked at the papers again. My hand trembled as I picked up the pen. The gold band on my finger, the same one George slid there 50 years ago, caught the light. Do you remember I said softly what your father used to say when something didn't feel right? Daniel rolled his eyes. Mom, please. If someone rushes you to sign, it's never for your good, I murmured. For a moment, the room went still. Then Lauren broke the silence. This isn't a scam, Mary. It's just business. I smiled faintly. I'm sure it is. I signed the paper, slowly, deliberately. Ink bled into the fibers, my name stretching across the page like a final breath. Daniel snatched the folder, relief washing over his face. Finally. Thank you, Mom. You'll see this is the right decision. He bent down, kissed my cheek. His lips were cold. Lauren gave me that polite fake smile. We'll be back next week to start cleaning things out. Maybe pack some of your sentimental things. They left, door slamming tires screeching down the driveway, and just like that, silence, the kind that hums in your ears. I sat alone at the table, staring at the empty chair across from me where George used to sit. His coffee mug still had a chip on the rim. I never threw it out. Happy now, George, I whispered. Your son's finally got what he wanted. The clock ticked. The house breathed. And then something caught my eye. A corner of the envelope Daniel had brought was sticking out from under the pile of mail. I frowned. He'd left something. I pulled it free. Another set of papers identical, except for a small note on the first page. In old, shaky handwriting, Mary used the second folder. Trust no one. H.M. My heart nearly stopped. Harold Miller, George's lawyer, his best friend. I flipped through the pages, different wording. Not a property transfer. A conditional power of attorney, only valid if I were declared legally deceased. My lips parted. I hadn't given my home away. I'd just set a trap. I leaned back, the air catching in my chest, a laugh bubbling up despite the tears in my eyes. Oh, Harold, I whispered. You clever old man. I tucked the second folder into the drawer right beside George's will. Outside, Daniel's voice drifted through the open window. She finally signed. It's done. Lauren laughed. Good. We'll list the house by next week. I closed the drawer slowly. Not so fast, sweetheart, I muttered. The kettle on the stove began to whistle a shrill, haunting sound. I poured myself a cup of tea, staring at the ink still drying on the false contract. Daniel thought I'd surrendered, but he forgot who taught me to read fine print. That night, the wind howled through the old oak outside. I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, the moonlight spilling across the floorboards. On the mantel, George's old photo seemed to look right at me. You did good, Mary, I imagined him saying. I smiled faintly, clutching the second folder to my chest. But just as I began to drift off, a sharp sound split the silence, 3 heavy knocks at the front door. Bang, bang, bang. I froze. It was nearly midnight. The porch light flickered on by itself. My breath caught. Who would come here now? And why? The knocking stopped as suddenly as it began. For a moment, I thought my heart had too. When I finally opened the door, there was no one there, just the cold night air and a white envelope resting on the porch mat. No return address. My name scrawled in black ink, Mary Caldwell. I picked it up, shut the door, and locked it. Twice. Then I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where my son had shouted at me hours earlier, and tore the envelope open. Inside was a short note typed neatly, "Mrs. Caldwell, please contact me as soon as possible. Harold Miller's office has pending documents that concern your late husband's estate. Clerk's office, Ridgeview County. Harold Miller, again." I pressed the note to my chest, whispering, "George, what did you and Harold do?" The next morning, I walked to Miller & Sons Law on Main Street. The sign was faded, the glass door cloudy with fingerprints. I hadn't been there in years since George's funeral, when Harold had read the will and promised me I'd be taken care of. A young clerk looked up as I entered. "Mrs. Caldwell, yes." He disappeared into a back room, then returned with a brown folder. "Mr. Miller passed away last month, ma'am, but he left specific instructions about your file." I took the folder in both hands. My stomach twisted as I opened it. Inside were copies of old bank documents, a key, and a short letter. Harold's handwriting, shaky but firm, Mary. If you're reading this, it means the day we feared has come. George's trust still exists. Your son doesn't know about it, and he mustn't. Everything you and George built is protected under the Caldwell Trust. Access requires the key enclosed and your signature at Ridgeview Bank. Trust your instincts. Always. Harold. I sat there in the lobby letter, trembling in my hand. Protected. A secret trust. For 10 years, I'd lived on a nurse's pension clipping coupons, skipping dinners, out saving pennies in a jar for emergencies, while an entire account had been sitting there waiting for me. A lump formed in my throat, a mix of anger and heartbreak. George had tried to protect me, and our son, our only son, had become the thing we'd feared most greedy. When I got home, Daniel's car was already in the driveway. "Where were you?" he barked the moment I stepped in. "Out. Out. Where you shouldn't be walking alone at your age." I hung my coat calmly. "I'm fine, Daniel." He followed me into the kitchen, the tension thick. "Lauren said you didn't answer your phone. We were worried." I looked at the blinking machine on the counter. One new voicemail. I pressed play. Lauren's voice filled the room. "Hi, Mary. Just reminding you we'll have movers come Monday to start clearing the basement. Please don't stress about it, okay?" My hand curled into a fist. Movers. "You're clearing out my things already," Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "It's for your safety, Mom. You don't need all this clutter. We'll keep what matters. What matters to you or to me," he sighed. "Don't start." I stepped closer. "Daniel, do you remember what's in that basement? Your father's medals, his journals, the trunk he brought home from the war." He avoided my eyes. "We'll store them. Somewhere safe." I felt something inside me crack like an old bone that had been healing wrong. "Somewhere safe," I repeated, my voice low. "That's what your father used to say about this house." "Mom," he said, softening, "I'm trying to help you." "No," I snapped louder than I'd meant to. "You're helping yourself. You and that woman." His face darkened. "Lauren's done more for me than anyone. She's done more for herself." I slammed my hand on the table. "You think I don't see it? The way she looks at this house, at the silverware, the furniture, like she's already picked what to sell first." For a moment, Daniel just stared at me. Then he said quietly, "You're losing it, Mom." That cut deeper than I expected. I remembered the night shifts, the cold meals, the long years I'd spent patching his clothes, paying his tuition, praying over his hospital bed when he broke his arm at 12. And now the boy I'd raised looked at me like I was a burden. He turned toward the door. "I'll come back Monday. Don't make this harder." I didn't stop him. The door slammed and the house went still again. That night, I opened Harold's letter one more time. My hand still trembled, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. There was a small brass key taped to the last page. Ridgeview Bank Deposit Box 112. I traced the numbers with my thumb. George had left something there for me. I could feel it. I pulled an old cardigan around my shoulders, sat by the window, and looked at the stars. The same sky George used to look at when he said, "No one can take what's truly yours, Mary." But he was wrong. People could take it if you let them. And I'd almost let Daniel do it. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The sky outside my window was the color of cold steel, and the air inside the house felt heavier than usual. I made myself a cup of coffee the way I always had 2 sugars, a splash of milk, and that quiet moment before the day began. But today, there was no calm in the quiet. There was only purpose. I tucked Harold's letter and the brass key into my purse, then grabbed my old wool coat, the one with the frayed collar George used to tease me about. It still smelled faintly of his cologne, the one he wore to church every Sunday. I locked the door behind me and walked toward the bus stop. Ridgeview Bank stood at the corner of Elm and Park Avenue, a tall modern building that looked far too clean for the secrets it held. I hadn't been there in decades, not since George and I first opened our account. The glass doors reflected my face, older, smaller, but determined. Inside, the air smelled of paper and disinfectant. A young teller with bright red nails smiled politely. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you today?" I slid the letter across the counter. "I need to access a safe deposit box, number 112. She frowned, reading Harold's note. "Do you have identification?" I handed over my old driver's license, the one with the photo George had taken. Himself slightly tilted and too close. She typed something into the computer, then looked up, surprised. "This box hasn't been accessed in over 15 years. "That sounds right," I said softly. She led me down a long hallway to a small private room. The walls were lined with metal boxes, each one holding someone's hidden story. She unlocked mine and handed me the box, small and gray with a little dust around the edges. "Take your time, Mrs. Caldwell." When she left, I placed the box on the table and lifted the lid. Inside was a single folder tied with a red ribbon, an old photograph, and a sealed envelope with my name written in George's handwriting. My breath caught. I untied the ribbon carefully, like unwrapping a piece of the past. The photo showed George standing in front of the house holding Daniel as a toddler, both smiling, sunburned, happy. On the back, George had written, "Everything I built is for you." I opened the envelope next. Inside was a single sheet of paper yellowed around the edges. It was a bank certificate, a trust fund under my name established 20 years ago. The amount made my knees go weak. $4,200,000, hidden all this time. I pressed my hand over my mouth, afraid I might make a sound. George had done it. He'd protected me even from the people he loved most. For years, I'd lived simply afraid of every rising bill, embarrassed to ask Daniel for help, believing I had nothing left but memories. And yet, this entire time, there had been a fortune with my name on it, waiting quietly untouched. My fingers trembled as I read the last line at the bottom of the certificate, "Beneficiary Mary Caldwell. Secondary Beneficiary Caldwell. Charitable Foundation, pending activation." A charitable foundation. George had planned to use the money for something bigger, something lasting, maybe scholarships, maybe hospitals, maybe to show Daniel that legacy wasn't about greed. I placed everything back into the box except the photo. That one I tucked into my coat pocket. When I returned to the teller, she smiled. "Did you find what you needed?" I nodded. "Yes, more than I expected." Outside, the morning light had softened the wind, carrying the faint smell of cinnamon from the bakery across the street. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel weak. I felt awake. On the bus ride home, I thought about what to do next. Part of me wanted to tell Daniel right away to throw the truth in his face. But another part, the wiser part, knew that timing was everything. If I wanted to teach him what greed costs, I couldn't just tell him. I had to let him see it for himself. When I arrived home, the answering machine light was blinking. I pressed play. "Mom, it's Daniel. I hope you're not upset about yesterday. We just want to help. Call me back, okay?" His voice sounded smooth, rehearsed. I deleted the message. Then the second one played. "Mrs. Caldwell, this is Ridgeview Bank. Please confirm your visit this morning. Also, we noticed someone attempted to access your account earlier this week but didn't have authorization. We've secured your file, but please call us immediately." I froze. Someone had already tried to get in. I didn't need to guess who. I looked at the framed photo of Daniel on the mantel. His smile used to make me proud. Now it made me uneasy. That night, I sat by the fireplace, the flames casting soft shadows on the walls. I opened George's photo again. "You were right," I whispered. "He doesn't understand value anymore. But I'll show him. I'll show him what we built." I pulled out the second folder Harold had left me, the one Daniel didn't know existed. The pages were filled with notes about the Caldwell Trust, including one section highlighted in blue ink: "Ownership of the Caldwell property cannot be transferred until Mary Caldwell's death is legally verified." My lips curled into a faint smile. Daniel thought he owned this house, but by law, he couldn't even sell it, not without me. The house creaked as the wind brushed against it, almost like it was sighing in relief. I ran my hand across the table where Daniel had slammed his fist. "You think you took everything, son," I murmured, "but you took nothing." In the distance, thunder rolled. Rain started to patter against the windows. I went to bed that night with a plan forming in my mind, clear, cold, and steady. Tomorrow, I would visit Harold's assistant at the law office and update the documents. If Daniel wanted a war, I would make sure he never knew which battlefield he was standing on. And for the first time in years, I slept soundly. But when I woke the next morning, something strange waited on my porch again. A fresh envelope. This time, it wasn't from Harold's office. It was from my son. The handwriting was sharp, hurried, desperate. "Mom, we need to talk. Right now. It's important." I stared at it for a long time before opening the door. The sky was gray again, the air thick with rain. Somewhere deep down, I knew whatever came next would change everything. Daniel's car was already in the driveway when I returned from the market that afternoon. The rain had stopped, but the pavement was still slick and shining. I could see him pacing through the front window phone, pressed to his ear, his face tight with frustration. When I opened the door, he spun around. "Where have you been, grocery store?" I said calmly, setting down a paper bag. I didn't realize I needed to report my errands now. He didn't laugh. "Mom, this isn't funny. Something's going on with the bank. I tried to access the mortgage records, and they said the account is sealed under some kind of trust. Do you know anything about that?" I kept my voice steady. "No, Daniel, I don't." He stared at me for a long moment, suspicion flickering behind his eyes. "The bank said Harold Miller's name is still on some of your files. He's been dead for months. Why would his signature still matter?" "Maybe because Harold did his job," I said quietly. "He was loyal. That's rare these days." Daniel slammed his hand against the back of a chair. "You're hiding something." Lauren walked in behind him carrying a folder. "Can we not do this again?" she said, rolling her eyes. "Let's just get her to sign the new document and be done with it." "New document?" I asked, wiping my hands with a towel. Lauren placed the folder on the table, sliding it toward me like a dealer pushing out a bad hand. "It's just a correction. Legal formality. The lawyer said the first transfer was missing a witness signature." "I see." I said, my voice calm, though my pulse was drumming in my ears. I sat down, glanced over the first page. Legal jargon filled every line, clauses, signatures, subclauses, but I noticed one difference from before. The date. This one was backdated 3 weeks. That wasn't just sloppy, it was deliberate. "You had this prepared before you came to see me last time," I said. Lauren hesitated. "It's standard." "No, it's not." I interrupted, my eyes locking on hers. "You're trying to erase the last contract, the one you think I signed." Daniel's voice rose. "Mom, stop acting like you know more than you do. You don't understand how these things work." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said. "You want to own everything before I die. Isn't that right?" He looked at me, jaw clenched. "You make it sound ugly." "It is ugly," I said softly, "especially coming from your own child." He started pacing again, running a hand through his hair. "You're being paranoid. I'm just trying to help you manage your estate before something happens to you." "I'm still standing, Daniel," I said. "Nothing's happened to me yet." The silence stretched between us. Lauren reached into her purse and pulled out a pen. "Just sign it, Mary. It's really for the best." I looked down at the papers again. Then, without a word, I reached into my cardigan pocket and pressed a small button on my phone. It started recording. "I just want to be clear," I said slowly. "This document transfers my house entirely into your name, correct?" Daniel exhaled loudly. Yes, Mom, it does. That's the whole point. And you're saying it's for my benefit. He hesitated, then nodded. Of course it is, Lauren added quickly. We're just helping you. Think of it as family business. I nodded, pretending to waver. All right, I said finally, if that's what you want. I signed the top page, then flipped to the last one and left it blank. Daniel's relief was immediate. Thank you, Mom, he said, snatching up the folder. You won't regret this. Oh, I said quietly, I think you will. He looked at me confused, but I was already standing. You should probably go now, I said. Dinner's in an hour and I don't cook for thieves. Lauren gasped. Excuse me, you heard me, I said. My voice calm, cold. You came here for what isn't yours. You got a signature, but not the one that matters. Daniel stepped forward. What are you talking about? You'll find out, I said. Soon. They left in a hurry, muttering to each other as they slammed the door. I watched their car reverse out of the driveway and disappear down the street. Then I sat down at the table, opened my phone, and replayed the recording. Their voices came through clearly. Daniel's impatience, Lauren's manipulation, my question, his answer. It was all there. Proofs. I transferred the file to my computer, renamed it House Transfer Confession MP3, and emailed a copy to myself and Harold's old law firm. Then I poured myself a glass of water, my hands finally steady. The old clock on the wall chimed 5. I looked around the house, the same one I'd scrubbed, painted, repaired, and paid for every inch of. It didn't look like a prison anymore. It looked like a fortress. That night, I sat by the window again, watching the lights flicker across the neighborhood. My phone buzzed a message from an unknown number. Unknown. You shouldn't have gone to the bank, Mary. Some things are better left buried. I stared at the screen, the blood draining from my face. I typed back one word. Who? No reply. The next morning, I received a call from Ridgeview Bank. The manager's tone was urgent. Mrs. Caldwell, we need you to come in immediately. There's been activity on your trust account. Someone tried to withdraw funds using an authorization code. My voice barely came out. Who your son, ma'am? For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then I felt something inside me harden. Whatever pity I still had for Daniel vanished. I'll be there in an hour, I said. After hanging up, I stood in front of the mirror. My reflection looked older, yes, but stronger too. You wanted power, Daniel, I whispered. Now you'll see what real power looks like. I picked up my purse, slid Harold's letter inside, and walked toward the door. The rain had stopped again, but the air was heavy, full of something coming, a storm that wasn't quite done yet. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to meet it head on. Because I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was the woman you shouldn't have underestimated. Daniel's car was already in the driveway when I returned from the market that afternoon. The rain had stopped, but the pavement was still slick and shining. I could see him pacing through the front window, phone pressed to his ear, his face tight with frustration. When I opened the door, he spun around. Where have you been, grocery store? I said, calmly setting down a paper bag. I didn't realize I needed to report my errands now. He didn't laugh. Mom, this isn't funny. Something's going on with the bank. I tried to access the mortgage records and they said the account is sealed under some kind of trust. Do you know anything about that? I kept my voice steady. No, Daniel, I don't. He stared at me for a long moment, suspicion flickering behind his eyes. The bank said Harold Miller's name is still on some of your files. He's been dead for months. Why would his signature still matter? Maybe because Harold did his job, I said quietly. He was loyal. That's rare these days. Daniel slammed his hand against the back of a chair. You're hiding something. Lauren walked in behind him, carrying a folder. Can we not do this again? She said, rolling her eyes. Let's just get her to sign the new document and be done with it. New document? I asked, wiping my hands with a towel. Lauren placed the folder on the table, sliding it toward me, like a dealer pushing out a bad hand. It's just a correction. Legal formality. The lawyer said the first transfer was missing a witness signature. I see. I said, my voice calm, though my pulse was drumming in my ears. I sat down, glanced over the first page. Legal jargon filled every line, clauses, signatures, subclauses, but I noticed one difference from before. The date. This one was backdated 3 weeks. That wasn't just sloppy, it was deliberate. You had this prepared before you came to see me last time, I said. Lauren hesitated. It's standard. No, it's not, I interrupted, my eyes locking on hers. You're trying to erase the last contract, the one you think I signed. Daniel's voice rose. Mom, stop acting like you know more than you do. You don't understand how these things work. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said. You want to own everything before I die. Isn't that right? He looked at me, jaw clenched. You make it sound ugly. It is ugly, I said softly, especially coming from your own child. He started pacing again, running a hand through his hair. You're being paranoid. I'm just trying to help you manage your estate before something happens to you. I'm still standing, Daniel, I said. Nothing's happened to me yet. The silence stretched between us. Lauren reached into her purse and pulled out a pen. Just sign it, Mary. It's really for the best. I looked down at the papers again. Then without a word, I reached into my cardigan pocket and pressed a small button on my phone. It started recording. I just want to be clear, I said slowly. This document transfers my house entirely into your name, correct? Daniel exhaled loudly. Yes, Mom, it does. That's the whole point. And you're saying it's for my benefit. He hesitated, then nodded. Of course it is, Lauren added quickly. We're just helping you. Think of it as family business. I nodded, pretending to waver. All right, I said finally, if that's what you want. I signed the top page, then flipped to the last one and left it blank. Daniel's relief was immediate. Thank you, Mom, he said, snatching up the folder. You won't regret this. Oh, I said quietly, I think you will. He looked at me confused, but I was already standing. You should probably go now, I said. Dinner's in an hour, and I don't cook for thieves. Lauren gasped. Excuse me. You heard me, I said, my voice calm, cold. You came here for what isn't yours. You got a signature, but not the one that matters. Daniel stepped forward. What are you talking about? You'll find out, I said, soon. They left in a hurry, muttering to each other as they slammed the door. I watched their car reverse out of the driveway and disappear down the street. Then I sat down at the table, opened my phone, and replayed the recording. Their voices came through clearly. Daniel's impatience, Lauren's manipulation, my question, his answer. It was all there. Proof. I transferred the file to my computer, renamed it House Transfer Confession.mp3, and emailed a copy to myself and Harold's old law firm. Then I poured myself a glass of water, my hands finally steady. The old clock on the wall chimed 5. I looked around the house, the same one I'd scrubbed, painted, repaired, and paid for every inch of. It didn't look like a prison anymore. It looked like a fortress. That night, I sat by the window again, watching the lights flicker across the neighborhood. My phone buzzed a message from an unknown number. Unknown. You shouldn't have gone to the bank, Mary. Some things are better left buried. I stared at the screen, the blood draining from my face. I typed back one word, who. No reply. The next morning, I received a call from Ridgeview Bank. The manager's tone was urgent. Mrs. Caldwell, we need you to come in immediately. There's been activity on your trust account. Someone tried to withdraw funds using an authorization code. My voice barely came out. Who your son, ma'am? For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then I felt something inside me harden. Whatever pity I still had for Daniel vanished. I'll be there in an hour, I said. After hanging up, I stood in front of the mirror. My reflection looked older, yes, but stronger too. You wanted power, Daniel, I whispered. Now you'll see what real power looks like. I picked up my purse, slid Harold's letter inside, and walked toward the door. The rain had stopped again, but the air was heavy, full of something coming. A storm that wasn't quite done yet. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to meet it head on, because I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was the woman you shouldn't have underestimated. The bank smelled faintly of old paper and carpet cleaner when I walked in. The same young teller from before looked up surprised. Mrs. Caldwell, we were just about to call you again. Please come with me. She led me into a small office where a man in a gray suit stood waiting. His nameplate read, Mr. Hanley, branch manager. He gestured for me to sit down. Mrs. Caldwell, he began carefully, your trust account was accessed this morning using a code linked to your son's name. He claimed to have your authorization. My stomach turned. And did he? Hanley shook his head. No. The code was incomplete. It triggered a security alert. The attempt was blocked, but we thought you should know. I gripped my purse tightly. Did he see the balance? Only the main screen, he said. The trust total appears automatically before it locks out unauthorized access. I felt the blood drain from my face. Then he saw it. Yes, ma'am. The total funds, $4.2 million, would have been visible for about 3 seconds. 3 seconds was all it would take. Hanley leaned forward. Mrs. Caldwell, if you'd like, we can restrict the account further, add a legal hold. I shook my head slowly. No, don't touch anything yet. Let's see what my son does next. That evening, I didn't have to wait long. Daniel stormed into the house without knocking his hair disheveled, his voice loud. $4 million, Mom. Are you kidding me? I stayed seated at the kitchen table, sipping tea. Good evening to you, too. He slammed his hands on the table. You've had that money all this time while I was struggling to pay my mortgage. While Lauren and I cut him off. You didn't struggle, Daniel. You gambled. You bought cars you couldn't afford and houses you didn't need. There's a difference. His eyes widened. So you were just going to sit on it? Let it rot in some account. I was waiting for the right time, I said. He paced the kitchen like a trapped animal. I can't believe this. You lied to me. No, Daniel. I protected what your father and I built. You're the one who tried to steal it. He stopped pacing and glared at me. That money should be mine. It isn't, I said evenly. It belongs to the Caldwell Trust. And as of this morning, it's under a special clause. What clause? I reached into my purse and pulled out a single folded paper, the one Harold had drafted before he died. This one. I placed it on the table. His eyes scanned the first line and his face paled. All assets under the Caldwell Trust are to be donated to charitable foundations in the event of any attempted fraud or unauthorized withdrawal. You wouldn't, he hissed. I already did. For a moment, the room went dead quiet. I could hear the clock ticking, the wind pushing against the window. Then he snatched the paper, crumpled it in his hand, and shouted, You've lost your mind. I stood up slowly, meeting his gaze. No, Daniel. I finally found it. He threw the paper onto the floor and stormed toward the door. You'll regret this, Mom. I swear to God you will. The door slammed so hard the frame shook. I waited until his car was gone before I exhaled. My knees were trembling, but my heart was steady. The next morning, I met Harold's assistant at the law office, a woman named Susan Webb. She was in her 50s with soft gray eyes and a voice that carried quiet authority. Mrs. Caldwell, she said, shaking my hand, Mr. Miller spoke very highly of you. He told me once, if Mary ever comes to see you, she'll need more than advice, she'll need protection. Then I'm glad I came, I said. We sat in her office, surrounded by shelves of legal binders. I explained everything, Daniel, the fake contracts, the bank attempt, the trust. She listened carefully, nodding but saying nothing until I finished. Finally, she said, I can strengthen the trust and make it untouchable. We'll transfer management to a charitable entity where you're the sole executor. That way your son can't access anything even if he tries again. Do it, I said without hesitation. She smiled slightly. You remind me of my mother. Tough when it counts. I chuckled softly. I wasn't always. While she drafted the paperwork, I stared out her office window at the street below. People hurrying cars, honking lives, rushing forward. For the first time in years, I felt the strange thrill of control, something I thought I'd lost when George died. When Susan handed me the final form, I signed it without flinching. There, she said, it's done. The Caldwell Foundation is officially registered. You're the trustee. No one can move a cent without your written approval. Not even family. Especially not family, she said. By the time I got home, the sun was setting. The house looked peaceful again, golden light spilling through the windows. But I knew peace never lasted long in this story. Sure enough, the phone rang. Mom Daniel's voice came through tight and angry. You think you've won? You can't just lock me out. I didn't lock you out, I said. You never had a key. You're making a mistake, he snapped. That money Dad wanted me to have it. "No, Daniel," I said softly. "He wanted you to earn it." He hung up. A few minutes later, a text message appeared. "Daniel, you'll regret this." Then another, seconds later. "Daniel, you think you're smarter than me? Watch the news tomorrow." I stared at the screen uneasy. What was he planning? That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with George's old photograph and the folder from Susan. The papers glowed faintly under the lamplight, the ink still fresh. Everything was finally safe, sealed, secure. But in my chest, something heavy remained, a mother's ache that no victory could cure. I whispered to the photo I did what I had to George. I protected what was ours. A tear slid down my cheek. Then outside, a car engine rumbled to life. Headlights flashed through the window. Daniel's car parked across the street. He was watching the house. I didn't move, didn't turn off the lights. I just sat there, staring back through the curtains, waiting for the next move. Because I knew my son. He wouldn't stop until he had nothing left to lose. The next morning, I woke to the sound of glass breaking. It wasn't a loud crash, just a sharp crack that echoed through the hallway, followed by the soft creak of a door. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it. Then I heard footsteps, heavy ones. I reached for my phone and whispered 911, but stopped halfway. I knew that walk. I knew that rhythm. "Daniel." I stood in the hallway, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. He stepped out from the kitchen. Hair, messy eyes, red. He'd been drinking. "Daniel," I said quietly. "What are you doing here?" He looked around the living room, scanning the walls, the shelves, the drawers. "Where is it? Where's what?" "The paperwork," he snapped. "The trust, the accounts, whatever you did with Dad's money." I swallowed. "You broke into my house for that?" He didn't answer. He yanked open drawers, flipped cushions, knocked over a lamp. "You think you can hide it from me? It's mine." "It's not," I said, my voice rising. "And it never will be if this is who you've become." He stopped and looked at me. "You think you're better than me, don't you? I think I raised you better than this." He laughed bitterly. "You raised me to survive. That's what I'm doing." I stepped closer, my hands trembling but steady enough to hold his gaze. "Survival doesn't mean stealing from your mother." He slammed his hand on the mantel, sending picture frames crashing to the floor. "You don't understand, Mom. You have no idea what I've done to keep things together. Then tell me I shouted. Tell me what's worth breaking into your own home for." He froze, his breath heavy. For a split second, something human flickered in his eyes. Fear, guilt, maybe even shame. Then he turned away. "You wouldn't understand," he muttered, walking toward the door. Before he left, he turned back. "You think you've won, but you haven't. If I can't get that money legally, I'll find another way." The door slammed behind him. I stood there shaking, surrounded by broken glass and silence. For the first time, I didn't feel angry. I felt sorry. Not for myself, but for the boy I'd lost long before this day. That afternoon, I called Susan Webb. "He came here," I said. He broke in. Her voice was calm. "Did he take anything? No. But he's desperate. I think he'll try something else." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "We can take additional steps. There's a legal option called a conditional transfer. It allows you to move the property into a foundation temporarily. That way, even if your son files a claim, the house won't legally exist in your personal name." I took a deep breath. "Do it. I'll bring the documents to you tomorrow," she said. When we hung up, I felt the faintest sense of relief, like I'd just moved one step ahead in a long, dangerous game. But Daniel was faster. That evening, a police car pulled up outside. 2 officers knocked on my door. Mrs. Caldwell, one asked. We received a call about a domestic disturbance and possible theft. My heart sank. "From who, your son, ma'am? He says you're withholding his inheritance and threatening him." I let out a bitter laugh. "Did he also tell you he tried to steal it?" They exchanged a look. "We just need to ask a few questions." I invited them in, showed them the papers, the trust documents, the bank correspondence. They took notes, apologetic, but bound by procedure. When they left, one officer said quietly, "He's angry, ma'am, but you're doing the right thing." After they drove off, I sat by the window again. The streetlights flickered, and across the road, Daniel's car was gone. For now. I poured myself a cup of tea, but it tasted bitter. My reflection in the kitchen window looked older than I remembered. The next day, Susan arrived with the documents. "Sign these," she said gently. It transfers ownership of the property into the Caldwell Charitable Foundation. You'll remain the director, but on paper this house is no longer yours. It belongs to the foundation. So Daniel can't touch it, I said. Not unless he sues a charity, she replied, smiling faintly, and that would destroy his reputation. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake this time. I signed every page slow and deliberate, just like George would have. When we finished, Susan placed the file in her briefcase. It's done. By next week, the county registry will reflect the change. Thank you, I said softly. She hesitated at the door. You might want to stay somewhere else for a few nights. Let things cool off. I shook my head. This is my home, and I'm not leaving again. That night, the phone rang again. Daniel's number. I didn't answer. It rang a second time, then a third. Finally, I picked up. Mom, he said, his voice calmer than before. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have yelled. I said nothing. I don't understand why you're doing this. Because I said quietly, you stopped seeing me as your mother the moment you saw me as an obstacle. He was silent for a long time. Then he said, I love you, Mom. I closed my eyes. Love doesn't sound like what you've done, Daniel. I can fix it, he said quickly. Just meet me tomorrow at the bank, please. Why, I'll explain there. The line went dead. I sat there for a while, staring at the phone in my hand. My gut told me not to go, but my heart, still foolishly motherly, told me I had to see him one last time. The next morning, I dressed neatly as if for Sunday service. A pale blue blouse, pearl earrings, George's watch. I wanted to look composed, untouchable. When I arrived at Ridgeview Bank, Daniel was already there, pacing near the entrance. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes hollow from lack of sleep. Mom, he said, stepping forward. Thank you for coming. I nodded. Say what you need to say. He gestured toward the teller counter. Come inside. I just want to show you something. We walked together, the floor tiles clicking under our shoes. The teller greeted us nervously. She must have recognized him from his previous attempt. Mr. Caldwell, she said carefully. We already explained that I know, he interrupted. I just want my mother to see it for herself. He pointed to the screen. My name appeared, the account number, and then the trust name, the Caldwell Charitable Foundation. Daniel's voice cracked. You gave it away. No, I said softly. I gave it purpose. He stared at the screen, his face drained of color. For the first time in a long while, Daniel looked small, like the boy who once held my hand crossing Main Street, terrified of traffic. He took a step back, shaking his head. I don't understand. You don't have to, I said. You just have to live with it. His eyes glistened, and for a second I thought I saw regret. Then he turned and walked out of the bank without another word. The teller looked at me uncertainly. Are you all right, Mrs. Caldwell? I nodded, though my hands were trembling. Yes, I think it's finally over. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Because love doesn't vanish that easily, and neither does greed. And I could feel it somewhere in the quiet hum of the bank. The story wasn't finished yet. The next morning, I woke up to a silence that felt too heavy to be normal. The kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes you listen harder, even though you don't want to hear what comes next. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A notification from Ridgeview Bank. I squinted at the screen. Unauthorized attempt blocked Caldwell Charitable Foundation account. My heart lurched. Again, I threw on my robe and went downstairs. The coffee pot was still half full from yesterday, but my hands shook too much to pour. I called the bank right away. Mrs. Caldwell, the manager, said, his tone brisk but careful. We had another access attempt early this morning. Someone tried to log into the foundation account using a cloned authorization code. Who was it? He hesitated. It came from an IP address registered to your son's office. I closed my eyes. Thank you for letting me know. Please freeze all online access. Yes, ma'am, already done. When I hung up, I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry anymore. Just tired, so tired that even breathing felt like work. I sat at the kitchen table and stared out the window. Across the street, Daniel's car was gone. For the first time in weeks, his house looked dark. Curtains closed. Mail piling up on the porch. I knew what that meant. He wasn't home. He was running from something. Around noon, Susan called. "Mary, I've just spoken to the bank. I'm sorry you're still dealing with this." "It's fine," I said quietly. "He's not going to stop until he's broken." She paused. "Then it's time for the next step." "What step?" She explained that, under the new structure, I could request a permanent restriction order, making the Caldwell Foundation legally independent. Once approved, no relative, no heir, no one but the foundation board could ever alter it. In other words, I could make sure Daniel would never touch another penny. "Do it," I said, "today." She promised to file the paperwork that afternoon. After hanging up, I sat there for a long time tracing the rim of my coffee cup with my finger. Outside, the wind picked up. The old oak tree swayed gently, scattering leaves across the porch. That was when I saw it, a familiar car pulling up across the street. Daniel's. He got out slowly, wearing the same wrinkled suit from yesterday. But this time, he wasn't alone. Lauren was with him. They stood at the end of my walkway for a moment, arguing. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the anger in his gestures and the tightness in her face. Finally, she threw up her hands and walked away, leaving him there alone. Daniel took a deep breath, then started toward my door. I didn't move. The knock came 3 soft taps. Not like before. I opened the door halfway. "You should leave, Daniel." He looked at me, eyes red-rimmed, shoulders slumped. "Mom, please. I just want to talk." I hesitated, then opened the door fully. "You have 5 minutes." He stepped inside, glancing around as if he barely recognized the house. I went to the bank again. "They told me everything." "Good," I said. "Now you understand." He nodded slowly. "You really did it. You gave away everything Dad built. I protected it. I corrected. From you." He sank into a chair, his voice trembling. "You don't get it. I didn't want the money for me." I raised an eyebrow. "Then for who?" He looked down at his hands. "Lauren's been in trouble. Her business collapsed. She owes a lot. I thought if we had something to show the creditors if we transferred the house." I interrupted. "You mean if you stole it?" He didn't argue, just stared at the floor. The truth landed heavier than I expected. Not because it shocked me, but because it didn't. Deep down, I'd known this wasn't just greed. It was desperation. Still, it didn't make it right. "I can't help you," I said finally. He looked up, eyes glistening. "Mom, please. I made mistakes, I know that. But you don't understand how bad things are. We could lose everything. Then maybe that's what needs to happen," I said softly. "Maybe you need to know what losing everything feels like." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile. "You'd really do that to your own son. I already did," I said, my voice firm. "And I'll do worse if you keep pushing." He stared at me, speechless. Then without another word, he turned and walked out the door. Through the window, I watched him stop by his car and stare at the ground for a long moment before driving away. For the first time, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. That night, I got a call from the bank again. Mrs. Caldwell, the manager, said carefully, "I think you should know your son came in this afternoon. He asked to view the foundation's balance in person. I told him it was restricted. He insisted. So I showed him the main screen to confirm his name wasn't listed anywhere." My heart skipped. And what did he do? The manager hesitated. He just stared at it, didn't say a word. Then he whispered something I couldn't quite catch and left. "What was on the screen?" I asked. "The account total," he said. $4,200,000 under the Caldwell Charitable Foundation, and beneath it a message your lawyer must have added. A message, he read it aloud. This trust was built on love, not entitlement. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I remembered Susan telling me she wanted to add something personal, something that would make it sting. She must have used my words from the meeting. The manager continued. "He just froze, Mrs. Caldwell. I think he finally understood." "Thank you," I said quietly. That's all I needed to know. When I hung up, I stared at the dark window. The reflection of my own face looked older, yes, but steadier too. I whispered to the silence. "Now you know, Daniel. Love isn't a transaction. I thought that was the end." But the next morning there was a letter in my mailbox. No return address, no stamp, just my name. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single line written in Daniel's handwriting. You were right, Mom. Love without limits costs everything. I sank into the porch chair, the paper fluttering in my hand. I didn't know if it was a confession, an apology, or a goodbye. All I knew was that my son had finally seen the truth, and somehow that hurt more than all the rest. For the first time in weeks, the house was quiet again, not tense or heavy, just still. The kind of quiet that settles in after a storm when everything is broken, but somehow clearer. I sat by the kitchen window, the morning light spilling over the table, illuminating the letter Daniel had left. The edges were smudged, the ink slightly blurred, as if his hand had trembled while writing it. I must have read that single line 100 times. You were right, Mom. Love without limits costs everything. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to tell me he'd finally stopped fighting the wrong enemy. Enough to tell me he'd seen what I was trying to protect all along, not the money, not the property, but the meaning behind them. Still, the ache in my chest didn't go away. I looked around the kitchen, the same faded wallpaper George and I had picked 40 years ago, the same chipped mugs Daniel used to paint with childish stars when he was 5. Every inch of this house held pieces of a family that used to exist, and now only one person remained to guard the ruins. The kettle began to whistle softly. I poured myself a cup of tea, sat down, and let the steam fog my glasses. Maybe this was what justice felt like at my age. Not joy, not triumph, but a quiet sort of peace mixed with regret. Later that afternoon, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, a young courier stood there holding a small envelope. Delivery for Mrs. Mary Caldwell. I signed for it and closed the door. The envelope bore the seal of Ridgeview County Court. My stomach tightened as I opened it. Inside was a notice confirming the final approval of the Caldwell Charitable Foundation. My name was listed as founder and director, effective immediately. Below a short note from Susan was paperclipped to the form, "It's done, Mary. The foundation is officially yours. No one, not even blood, can undo what you've built. S.W." I pressed the paper against my heart. George's dream had become real, even if the path to it had been paved with betrayal. For a long moment, I stood in the doorway, staring at the trees outside. The wind moved through the branches, carrying the scent of rain and earth. It felt like George was there again, standing beside me, his hand warm on my shoulder. That evening, as the sun began to sink behind the rooftops, I drove to the bank one last time. I wanted to see it with my own eyes, the proof that everything was safe. The teller recognized me immediately. "Good evening, Mrs. Caldwell. Would you like to view your account?" "Yes," I said. She led me to a private booth and pulled up the screen. There it was, the Caldwell Charitable Foundation. Balance untouched, status secure. But what caught my eye wasn't the numbers. It was a note beneath them added by the system after the registration went through primary purpose education grants for single mothers and veterans' families. I smiled through the tears that suddenly filled my eyes. "That was George's idea," I whispered. The teller looked at me curiously. "Excuse me." "Nothing," I said, wiping my eyes. "Just a promise kept." When I got home, the house smelled of rain again. I lit a candle on the mantel beside George's old photo. His smile, frozen in black and white, seemed to soften under the flickering light. "I did it," I told him quietly. "It's safe now. He can't hurt it anymore." But saying it aloud made something inside me ache, because protecting the legacy had meant losing the person it was meant for. I thought about calling Daniel. For a moment, I even picked up the phone. But then I remembered his last words, the hollow look in his eyes, and the silence that had followed. Maybe some distances aren't meant to be crossed right away. Maybe they need time. So instead, I sat down at the table and began writing a letter not to Daniel, not to Susan, but to the future. I wrote about George's sacrifices, about the nights he worked double shifts so Daniel could have new shoes. I wrote about the hospital where I'd spent half my life helping strangers live another day. And I wrote about love, the kind that costs, the kind that hurts, the kind that refuses to die even when everything else does. When I was done, I folded the letter neatly and tucked it inside the family Bible on the bookshelf. I didn't know who would find it one day. Maybe Daniel. Maybe a stranger. Maybe no one. But it didn't matter. The truth was finally where it belonged. That night, I brewed myself another cup of tea and sat by the window listening to the rain tapping against the glass. The neighborhood was quiet again, lights flickering in a few distant windows. Somewhere a dog barked. Life was still happening even after everything had fallen apart. I looked at George's picture and smiled faintly. "You were right," I said. "Sometimes protecting love means letting it break." The clock ticked softly. My eyelids grew heavy. For the first time in months, I didn't feel fear, only peace. But just before I drifted off to sleep, my phone buzzed on the table beside me. A new message from Daniel. "Mom, there's something you need to see." I stared at the screen, my heartbeat quickening. Was it another trick? A plea, a confession I didn't know. All I knew was that the story wasn't over yet, and part of me wasn't sure if I wanted it to be. The text message sat on my screen for nearly an hour before I opened it. The house was silent except for the steady ticking of the clock and the low hum of the refrigerator. The words glowed softly in the dark. "Mom, there's something you need to see." No explanation, no apology, just that. My first instinct was to ignore it, to delete the message and go to bed, but curiosity mixed with that stubborn ache only a mother knows wouldn't let me. I typed back, "What is it, Daniel?" A few minutes passed. Then the 3 little dots appeared on the screen. Typing, stopping, typing again. Finally, his reply came, "I sent it to your email. Please, just watch it." My stomach tightened. I opened my laptop, half expecting another scheme or some emotional trick. But when the inbox loaded, I saw a single new message from Daniel with a video attachment titled, "For You, Mom." I clicked play. The screen flickered, then showed Daniel sitting in his car, rain streaking the windshield behind him. He looked tired, older than he should have at 38. His voice was low, quieter than I'd ever heard it. "Mom," he began, "if you're watching this, I guess I couldn't say it to your face. You were right about everything. About money. About love. About me." He took a shaky breath. I spent years trying to prove I wasn't a disappointment. I thought if I could fix things, get the house, the trust, whatever it would mean, I was finally responsible. But all I did was lose the only person who ever believed in me. He paused, rubbing his eyes. I saw the message on the bank screen, the one about love not being entitlement. It hit me harder than I expected. I realized I've been trying to own something that was never mine to own. Not the money, not the house, not even the love you gave me. I thought I could buy my way back into your forgiveness, but I can't. My hand covered my mouth. The sound that came out of me was half sob, half breath. Daniel looked straight into the camera. "I'm sorry, Mom. Not because I lost the money, but because I lost you. I don't deserve a second chance, but if you ever decide to forgive me, I'll be here, trying to be better." He hesitated, then added softly, "You taught me that love costs everything. I just wish I hadn't learned it the hard way." The screen went black. For a long time, I didn't move. The rain outside started again, tapping against the windows in soft, rhythmic waves. I could feel something deep inside me cracking open the grief, the anger, the small, quiet hope that maybe redemption wasn't impossible after all. The next morning, I printed the video transcript and placed it in the same drawer as Harold's letters and George's photo. Beside it, I left a small handwritten note. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering without hatred. I didn't send Daniel a message. Not yet. Some things need time. But I made a pot of soup that night, the kind he used to love when he was a boy. Chicken noodle, extra carrots. I made too much, knowing full well I'd end up freezing most of it. Still, part of me hoped maybe one day he'd knock on the door again. Maybe this time it wouldn't be to take something away, but to bring something back. A week later, Susan stopped by to drop off the final foundation paperwork. "Congratulations," she said, handing me the official seal. "You're now the registered director of a $4 million charitable organization." I smiled faintly. I'd trade every dollar for one honest conversation with my son. Susan hesitated. "Maybe that conversation isn't as far away as you think." I didn't answer, but something in her words stayed with me long after she left. That night, I sat on the porch watching the streetlights flicker on. The air smelled like rain again. Across the road, Daniel's house was dark, but his mailbox was empty. Someone had been home. I sipped my tea and looked up at the sky. It was streaked with the soft colors of twilight pink gray, a touch of gold. The same shades George used to call forgiving light. For the first time in months, I let myself imagine what forgiveness might look like. Not as a grand gesture or tearful reunion, but maybe just two people sitting in silence sharing a cup of tea, both too tired to argue anymore. Inside the phone buzzed again. Another message. From Daniel, "Mom, can I come by tomorrow? I want to talk." I stared at it for a long time. My hand hovered over the keyboard. Finally, I typed back, "Come early. I'll make coffee." Then I put the phone down, turned off the light, and stood by the window looking out at the quiet street. The candle on the mantel flickered beside George's photo. His smile looked almost real in the glow. "Maybe this is it," I whispered. "Maybe this is what peace looks like." But as I reached to blow out the candle, my eyes caught something new on the windowsill, an envelope. Pale, unmarked, slipped through the slot sometime after dark. I picked it up, my pulse quickening. Inside was a single slip of paper folded neatly. In clean typed letters it read, "This isn't over, Mrs. Caldwell." The candlelight trembled, and so did I. Sometimes peace isn't the end of the story. It's just the breath before the next storm. Audience prompt. What would you do if the past refused to stay buried? Would you open that door again or walk away forever? I put down the envelope, my fingers trembling a little, and looked around the room. The walls seemed quieter now, as though they'd listened long enough. The candle beside George's photo flickered, then steadied. I stood by the window for a long while, thinking of my son, his anger, his regrets, the video he sent. I remembered his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. I remembered the weight of betrayal and the cost of love. Maybe peace would come, maybe not. But I'd learned something in this storm. True power isn't in what you own. It's in what you refuse to yield. So here I am telling my story, not because it's rare, but because it's sadly common. Betrayal in families, secrets passed down through generations, love turning into battlegrounds. I wanted you to see not just a fight over a house or money, but a woman standing up for her dignity, her legacy, her truth. But now I turn the story to you. If you were Mary Caldwell, would you open that unmarked envelope? Would you let Daniel come back after all that's happened? And more than anything, do you think love can survive such deep wounds? Please share your thoughts below. Tell me, what would you do in Mary's shoes? Would you forgive him or draw the line? If you feel this story touched you, hit subscribe so you won't miss the next dramatic chapter. Click like to help this story reach others who need to hear it, and share it. Maybe someone you know needs this reminder. You don't have to fight alone. Thank you for staying with me through this. I'll see you next time, where we'll explore another life, another lesson, another fight for the heart.